After about 1,400 marketing and sales conversations with CEOs, marketing directors, sales directors, business owners of all flavors and shapes and sizes, I have seen the exact same misunderstanding way more than anything else when it comes to marketing. And this misconception is responsible for losing millions of dollars, completely missing the mark on generating new business. And that makes it likely that you watching this might have some of the same misconceptions too. So that's what I want to get into is what this is, what it's costing you, and a different way to understand what marketing's job is so that you can let it do its job properly in this new AI crazy world that we're in. Let's get into it. Hi there. Yes, I am Jonathan W. Pritchard. I've been a sales and marketing consultant for a long time for all sorts of businesses. And the one thing that I would hope to get across by the end of this video is that nobody walks through your marketing in the order that you built it. Okay? That's what we're going to be talking about because they're going to find you from an AI summary, a reel, somebody else's podcast that was recorded months ago, maybe an article from 2022, then they left and then they come back 3 weeks later from a completely different door that you never expected. All right? Because every plan that you're going to build assumes there's a starting line and a finish line, and there isn't one. Okay. So that's what we're going to get into. And it's a very tempting misconception. And if you've been in the marketing world for longer than 5 minutes, you've probably seen the marketing funnel. And then weirdo douchebags talking about tofu, mofu, bofu. And we got to walk them through the funnel, right? And the funnel is a factory mindset. And that has to do with stations and units and throughput and scrap rate. And every station has a boss that's optimizing for their own numbers, right? And everything that doesn't make it through to the next step is scrap. Now, imagine saying that out loud about people that you want to work with that don't move through the system that you've built the way that you want them to move. Okay, now don't get me wrong. This approach, the funnel factory approach, works, right? Because there's a lot of value in specialization. And it used to be that attention was way more captive than it is right now. TV break, okay, there were only 3 stations. Back when I was a kid, I didn't have a TV until 1991 when my dad bought a black and white TV because of the Gulf War. We could get 1 station where we lived. So every single commercial that came on, we were watching those commercials. There was no changing the channel. There were fewer magazines. The direct mail seemed to work a lot more. You couldn't skip those ads. And if people can't leave, then a conveyor belt approach is a reasonable design. So the design isn't wrong, but the building that it existed in has been completely demolished. And I do want to take a minute to just kind of talk about where the nature of factories come from, because before factories, there was a workshop. One person made the whole thing start to finish. And that meant that each one was a little bit different from the others. Sure, you could have templates and jigs set up, but everything's going to be a little wonky. And then the assembly line broke that work into stations so that anybody is going to do one thing and one thing only. And that worked really well. And then along comes Henry Ford, and a car that used to take about 12 hours to get made was done in about 90 minutes. Like that's phenomenal. All right. So productivity drastically goes up, and nowadays we've got the IKEA-ification of everything. It has to be a universal standard, and everything that got shipped out of it has a hidden cost to it. It's a requirement. And that's the part that nobody talks about, which is the work has to be legible from the outside. Somebody outside that system has to be able to see what's going on in that system. It has to be countable. They have to be able to compare it to everything else. It has to be identical every single time. And the artisan, that person's judgment about what needs to happen in working with the medium and all that kind of stuff, that judgment is real, but it only exists in their head, so it's invisible to other people. So it gets engineered out in favor of the repeatable, it's same no matter what kind of approach that the factory approach does. All right. So the fact that expertise doesn't fit nice and tidy into a spreadsheet column means it gets weeded out. But here's what that legibility costs a company or a business. All right. So there's a book called Seeing Like a State by James C. Scott, and it is terrifying. Okay. If you've never read it, if you've never heard of it, go look it up and you'll understand why I decided to make this video, because it documents one thing from multiple angles, which is that an authority needs to see something that it can't see, so it forces the thing into a shape that it can see and count and keep track of. All right. So, for example, forests. German foresters in the 1700s came up with this brilliant idea. You know, this mixed woodland stuff is chaotic. It's difficult to keep track of. So, you know what we should do? We should just cut down everything, replant one kind of tree, do it in nice, neat rows on a grid, and now we can count the trees, we can predict how much yield we've got, we could plan the harvest. This will be fantastic. So the first rotation, it worked great, and they're like, yeah, this is fantastic. But the second rotation, everything died. Why? Well, they had stripped out all the undergrowth, the fungus, the deadfall, the bugs and insects, destroyed that entire ecosystem. And the first rotation pulled from the carcass of that forest. And then once that was all used up, the second round had nothing to work with, and that's why it died. All right. So everything that the authorities deemed to be unimportant got removed. And if they couldn't count it, let's get rid of it. All right. But all that stuff turned out to be part of what makes a forest workable. So they actually coined a word for what they had built, which is Waldsterben. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I read it. I don't speak German, but it basically translates to forest death. Great. All right. Then the same thing happens with farming, right? And different kinds of things to do with the economy with any kind of centrally planned approach. So the same operation aimed at humans collectivized farming, planned villages, agriculture approaches designed on paper by people that had never actually farmed a day in their life, right? So the plan looks perfect. It's legible. It's logical. This makes total sense. But the land doesn't obey that logic. All right. The consequence, famine, millions of people dying. All right. So the measuring of a thing doesn't cause the failure, but the failure comes from that thing getting rebuilt in order to fit the report. All right. Stick with me, because the funnel is that report. And attribution is the accounting pressure that makes it happen. All right. So the funnel is marketing's version of this planned forest. And it's even older than radio. All right. This funnel idea is older than Henry Ford. right? Because the thinking underneath it dates back to something like 1898, right? Somebody drew a funnel shape onto that concept in the 1920s, but we've been looking at this same stupid triangle for over 100 years, right? And it has survived this long for one big reason. It's the only picture of buying that you can put numbers onto, right? Wide at the top, narrow at the bottom, and this many people enter, this many people are here, this many people come out the other end of this marketing factory system called the funnel. So that's the Forrester's approach put onto the behavior of people. All right. So the thinking is, oh, everybody enters at the top. They don't. They come into your world wherever it is that they land. They think, oh, movement runs one direction. It doesn't. People go back up, sit still for a year. They might lap you a couple times, come out of orbit, come back to it, or that the funnel, the numbers only shrink. Well, it doesn't, right? One person could bring three people along for the ride, and none of them came through the way that the first person did. All right. So none of that concept survives contact with an actual buying experience or the way that people make up their mind on who to decide to do business with. All right. So the decision doesn't get filtered. The decision accumulates over time. And then one day they have accumulated enough experience to decide to do business with you. So it's kind of like thinking about walking through the fog. You don't notice that the fog is getting you wet, but at some point you realize, oh, I am soaked through. All right. So it's that kind of gradual accumulation that is marketing. All right. So the funnel has no way to account for accumulation, so we stop counting it. Same as the undergrowth for the forest. All right. Attribution is that concept's accounting system. So whenever you ask, all right, which piece produced the sale, you've already signed up for this worldview, and that question only makes sense if buying runs in a straight line from start to finish, which it doesn't. So what we do is that we build a system that answers that question anyway. So there's one entry, one path through to success. We're going to track conversion numbers all the way through, and the last click takes credit for the purchase. So watch what gets cut from that process. The conversation at the conference, the article that somebody forwarded to a friend that you never see, the reputation that shows up before you ever enter the room. All that gets cut first, not because it doesn't work, but because it doesn't show up in the tracking spreadsheet, all right? So you aren't measuring your marketing, you're rebuilding your marketing to agree with the shape of the dashboard you want to use to keep track of it. So nobody starves over using a UTM parameter or anything like that. It goes wonky in the same way, right? You're optimizing the map and paving the territory to match your map, destroying everything that that territory could create for you. Okay. So if this is the kind of weird thing that keeps you up at night, come join my community where we can dig into this. Or if you want to talk to me about your marketing and sales, I'm easy to get a hold of. I would love to talk to you about how this is taking shape in your own marketing. All right. But there's more I want to talk about, because there's a local optimization trap that comes along when you accept the funnel shape or the 1 to 2 to 3 kind of approach to marketing. All right. Which is that you can improve the conversion rate of every step in your process and wind up making less money, because every station is optimizing for handoff to the next station, not for the enjoyment of the person going through the process in the first place. All right. So you can tighten the landing page so it's converting better and it attracts more people who are bouncing. all right? Or you tweak your email, you're getting more clicks because you've promised the wrong thing. So you're getting more bad calls. So every number on the dashboard goes up because, oh, number go up, it's green, this is fantastic. But ultimately, it's hurting the business. So you're optimizing the stations, but the stations are not the journey that your prospect is taking in the world that we're in right now. The factory cannot see this process because the factory has no measurement that includes the whole factory. All right. So every station is legible on its own, but the whole system is dying. All right. Because I just mentioned it, there's somebody you forgot to ask. All right. Everybody in your company has a vote on the funnel. Marketing is weighing in, sales is weighing in, ops is saying, oh, here's what we should be doing. The agency that you're hiring is saying, oh yeah, we should do this. But you know who you didn't ask? Your prospect. All right. They were never in your funnel. All right. They are wandering around in their own way in what Google's calling the messy middle. They're doing their own thing, going all over the place, doing research at 2 a.m. when they're staying up at night thinking about the problem, and they're doing their own thing all over the place. But you're insisting that they are top of funnel, they're problem unaware, but now they are problem aware. They are solution unaware, but they are now solution aware. They are my solution aware, and oh, it's very neat and tidy. No, it isn't. So you are using this filter to create a misunderstanding of what the buyer journey actually is. All right. So what are you going to do instead if this funnel thing is a mirage that is enforcing a rigid approach to something that is way nonlinear? Create a landscape. That's the only solution. All right. Everything that you make and own sits at some elevation somewhere. The video, your articles, the reels you're creating, the newsletter, the squeeze page, it's all part of a topology, all right? And people kind of warp in wherever it is that they warp in. So there's no clear-cut entrance and no clear-cut exit. There's no sequence to it. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4, buy something. It's more like choose your own adventure from an interconnected network of let's get to know each other. All right. So the only question that really matters for any single piece, well, there are two, which is from here, what's closer to us? What invites them deeper into a relationship with us? And what else does this connect to so that if they aren't ready to take that next step deeper in, they've got other places to go while staying in your ecosystem. All right. So there are two ways that that approach goes sideways, which are flat assets that are satisfying their complete thought in and of themselves, and they end. All right. It's great work that doesn't go anywhere. They enjoy it and then they leave. It might just be an art piece, or it could be a great documentary, but no reason for being. They're just like, oh, that was cool. And then nothing. All right. Or the second way it goes wrong are uphill assets, which you're demanding too much effort from your prospect before you deliver any value, which is what I see here on YouTube all the time, which is, hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Sorry I haven't posted in a long time. It's been I don't care. That's all your stuff. That's all your baggage that you're asking me to wade through before you give me what it is that I came here for. How dare you? So if you're asking your prospects to do your work for you, don't be surprised when they say, you're not paying me for this, I'm out. All right. So you've got to create that ecosystem that is kind of downhill. All right. So there's an art and a science to this, which is kind of like a slope calibration. All right. Because you want everything to tilt towards, hey, give us a call, talk to us, hire us, whatever that next step is deeper into a relationship. But getting that angle right is the craft of creating this ecosystem, right? Because if you make that tilt too steep, every piece is trying to shove them towards the sale. All right. And you're pushing, you're like, buy now, buy the thing, buy. All right. And that's too much angle. And then they're going to tumble and fall down. That's not going to be a good time. So you're trying to ask them to arrive at the buying decision with no context and not enough trust for them to actually follow through, or they're going to bail because it feels like you're trying to herd them into a chute where they don't have any options. All right. So this is a lot like, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's some kind of celebration or whatever you want to call it, because it doesn't make sense, where they push the wheel of cheese down the hill and then people try to chase it and invariably tumble all the way to the bottom and probably get concussions. It's like that. That's what you're trying to do to your prospect, and it's not fun. All right. So a slope that is too steep is rebuilding the funnel by accident, because you're adding pressure and then you're calling it a buyer's journey when really you're just trying to pressure them into doing what you want them to do. The other way is too gradual of a slope, right? There's no gravity. It's beautiful content. It's complete. You're giving them a full picture, but there's no draw to, well, let's learn more about this. And this is the creator with an audience, but no business. It's like the influencer that has 36 million followers or whatever, and she couldn't sell a couple t-shirts. It's that problem. So the right angle is that each piece that you are creating in your ecosystem that you're allowing to grow into your confusing forest of material, each piece is worth their time exactly where it is, and then the next step costs less energy than leaving does. All right. So you want buying to be the easiest available thing they do next, not the most urgent, not the thing that you're pushing, but just the easiest, most natural next step. Second to that is checking out this other thing. All right. So since you like measuring things, and what gets measured gets managed, and you make data-driven decisions, and I'm science and I need numbers, okay, so what's the metric? How the hell do you know this is working if you can't attribute anything? All right, well, the factory is measuring conversion rate, and that's the measure of drop-off along each step. All right, it's the scrap rate, and it can only ever tell you who you lost. Right? But an ecosystem measures velocity. How fast does someone enter your world and then come out the other side in a deeper relationship with you? All right. So there are two things worth watching here. How long from first contact to customer it takes, and how many pieces they touched while getting there. All right. So the numbers floating around this space and from Google stuff, it's kind of roughly 11 interactions in a couple different shapes, somewhere between 2 and 7 hours spent with each other. All right. So that's kind of benchmarking, but those numbers are a velocity reading, right? They're describing how fast people are currently moving through somebody else's world, and yours will have its own number, all right? But, hint, hint, long videos like this that have been going on for 24 minutes already is a really good way to hit those numbers as they spend more and more time with you, all right? But velocity gives you something that drop-off and measuring drop-off could never do. It tells you whether your terrain is working as a whole, as a kind of its own universe, not whether one station had a good week this week in isolation. All right. Because again, conversion rate is the legible number that you're going to prefer because it's easy to measure, which is exactly why it has survived for so long. But velocity is the real number that tells you the truth, and it's harder to put on a slide or put into a report. So I'm going to ask you to take that trade anyway. All right, because the truth is hidden. It's difficult to see in this zero-click research marketing kind of world. But if you don't work with it, you're going to try to shove it into a shape that doesn't exist anyway and wonder why marketing doesn't work. All right. So factories call leaving waste because a factory only has one exit and one way in and out. All right. The terrain doesn't lose people. Terrain stays oriented in the right direction. They can climb out, sure, fine, but the slope is still there in 3 weeks when they come back through a completely different direction, a different door. All right. And they will come back at a lower elevation than they started because they're already in that direction. All right. So nothing is scrapped, nothing is wasted. It's just another shrub. It's another bush. It might not be a redwood tree, but it's part of the ecosystem that allows them to grow enough trust to reach out to you. All right. So you can't control the order that somebody is going to interact with your world, but you can control the angle of the relationships when you are designing your ecosystem and doing the landscaping and working with that process instead of trying to impose an outside in legibility to a thing that is completely unknowable. Because you can't even ask your prospects, oh, how did you hear about us? I don't remember, right? Like, think about the most important person in your life. Do you remember the first time you met? Probably if you've got a storybook relationship, but really, probably not. You're just like, I don't know. It just kind of feels like I've always known them. All right. So now that you kind of understand the real nature, the messy, non-linear, choose your own adventure, prioritizing the experience of the prospect over your desire to have a neat, tidy spreadsheet where everything makes sense and the formulas add up. If all this makes sense to you, sure, yeah, reach out to me. I would love to talk to you about how you've been approaching marketing and how we can kind of grow your own ecosystem by taking control of your messaging and putting it out there into the world in a way that people would like to experience. Or YouTube knows a lot about you and what you're interested in, so I'm going to trust the system to show you this video next, which I think you should watch. I'll see you over there.